1. The graduation that should have been perfect, the auditorium was transformed. Golden banners hung from the ceiling like promises of a bright future, and navy blue balloons, our class colors, floated tethered to chairs in perfectly aligned rows. The scent of fresh flowers mingled with the perfume of anxious mothers in the front row, all of them constantly adjusting their hair and checking their cameras for the 10th time. The murmur of nervous conversations echoed off the walls, punctuated by giggles from younger children running through the hallways. I should have been radiant. After all, it was my high school graduation, the moment I had imagined hundreds of times over the past 3 years. In my mind, it had always been perfect. Me on stage, receiving my diploma, and her in the audience with that proud smile only mothers know how to give, maybe even dabbing away a discreet tear with a tissue. But as I adjusted my cap for the 3rd time and watched classmates being embraced by complete families, that familiar emptiness settled in my chest like a cold stone. Dad was there, in the 5th row, trying to look less nervous than he actually was. Grandma had come too, in her light blue dress and the pearl brooch she only wore for special occasions. Uncle John waved at me from afar, holding his phone ready to record. All there for me, all proud. But she was missing. She was always missing. The principal began his speech about new beginnings and the future that awaits us. But his words dissolved into distant buzzing. My eyes automatically scanned the audience, a habit I had developed over the years. At every school presentation, every game, every important event, always that unconscious search for a face I knew wouldn't be there. I'll be right back, sweetheart. Her words echoed in my mind like they always did in important moments. I was 8 when she said that, kissed my forehead, and walked out the front door carrying only a small purse. It was an ordinary Tuesday in March. I remember because I was watching cartoons after school, and she interrupted to give that kiss and make that empty promise. I'll be right back. But she didn't come back that Tuesday, or Wednesday, or ever again. The memory came with the force of a wave. Me at the living room window, still in my school uniform, waiting to see her silhouette turning the corner. Dad calling me for dinner, his voice lower than usual. The next morning's breakfast in silence, just the sound of the spoon hitting the cup, and my child's question, "When is Mummy coming back?" His lost look, as if he too was waiting for an answer he didn't have. Lucas Harry Silva. My name echoed through the auditorium, abruptly pulling me from my thoughts. It was my turn. My legs trembled slightly as I stood up, and for a moment everything seemed unreal. The applause sounded distant, as if coming from another world. I walked to the stage with my heart beating irregularly, not from nervousness, but from that familiar pain that always arrived in moments that should have been pure joy. The diploma was warm in my hands when I took it. The principal smiled and shook my hand, murmuring congratulations I barely registered. What I really heard was the silence where her voice should have been shouting my name, the emptiness where her arms should have been waiting for me when I came down from the stage. I returned to my seat amid applause that seemed to echo in an abyss. Dad was standing, clapping with such enthusiasm it was touching. Grandma had indeed grabbed her tissue, but I knew the tears were also for those not being shed by the one who should have been there. The rest of the ceremony passed in slow motion. I watched my classmates being called one by one, each with their complete families, each living the perfect moment I could only imagine halfway. When it ended, and the photos began, I pretended to smile while posing with Dad and Grandma. But inside, that 8-year-old's question kept echoing. When is Mummy coming back? And for the first time in 10 years, instead of feeling just sadness, I felt anger. Anger that she had chosen to miss this. Anger that I was growing up in the empty spaces she left behind. Anger that I was still waiting, even knowing that I'll be right back had been a lie from day one. 2. Growing up with an invisible hole, Dad tried his best, but there were things he simply couldn't understand. Like why I always sat by the window during thunderstorms, or why I refused to let him throw away the faded yellow sundress that still hung in their closet. He learned to braid my hair for school pictures through YouTube videos, his large fingers fumbling with the strands while I sat perfectly still, pretending it didn't hurt when he pulled too tight. "Your mum would have done this better," he'd mutter under his breath, not realizing I could hear him. Would have. Past tense. As if she were dead instead of just ... gone. The invisible hole she left behind shaped everything. I became the child who never asked for anything, terrified that wanting too much might make someone else leave. I learned to fold my own clothes at age 9, make my own breakfast at 10, and by 12, I was signing my own permission slips with Dad's shaky signature because he worked double shifts and forgot. At school, the questions were the worst part. "Where's your mum?" asked with that innocent cruelty only children possess. At first, I made up elaborate stories. She was traveling for work, she was sick, she was visiting her sister in another state. But lies have weight, and eventually, they became too heavy to carry. "She's just not around," became my standard answer, delivered with a shrug that I practiced in the bathroom mirror until it looked natural. The truth was too complicated, too raw. How do you explain to a 10-year-old classmate that your mother walked out of your life as casually as someone steps out to buy milk? How do you describe the way absence becomes a presence? How it sits at the dinner table, sleeps in the empty side of your parents' bed, and follows you to every Mother's Day craft session where you pretend to be making gifts for grandma instead? The hole was deepest during the moments when I needed her most. When I got my first period at 13 and had to call Dad at work, whispering my panic into the phone while he stammered through an explanation about pads and heating pads, his voice thick with his own helplessness. When I won the school science fair and stood on that little platform, searching the sparse audience for a face that would never materialize. When I came down with pneumonia at 15 and spent 3 days delirious with fever, calling out for Mama in my sleep while Dad held cold washcloths to my forehead with tears in his eyes. "She loved you, you know," he said one night after I'd recovered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever happened, whatever made her go, it wasn't because she didn't love you. But love that leaves doesn't feel like love. It feels like abandonment wearing love's clothes." I learned to read Dad's moods like weather patterns. The way his shoulders slumped when he passed her photos, still displayed around the house like shrines to a ghost. How he'd pour himself exactly 2 glasses of whiskey on the anniversary of the day she left. Then sit in his chair, staring at nothing until he fell asleep. How he never dated, never even looked at another woman, as if he was still married to her shadow. The worst part wasn't the big moments, the graduations, the birthdays, the hospital visits. It was the small ones. The way I automatically set the table for 3 people well into my teens before catching myself. How I'd pick up the phone expecting her voice when it rang, even years later. The split-second hope I felt every time someone knocked on the door unexpectedly. I became expert at filling the silence. I talked to myself, to the cat, to her picture on my nightstand. I narrated my day to the empty air, pretending she was listening from wherever she'd gone. "I got an A on my history test today," I'd whisper to the darkness. I think he would have been proud. The hole made me fiercely independent and desperately afraid all at once. I excelled at everything because achievement felt like armor against abandonment. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, perfect attendance. If I was good enough, maybe everyone else would stay. If I was good enough, maybe she'd come back. But perfection is exhausting, and by 17, I was running on empty, fueled by nothing but the desperate hope that somewhere, somehow, she was still thinking about the little girl who'd been waiting by the window for nearly a decade. 3. The unexpected arrival of the letter. The reception hall buzzed with the energy of celebration. Families clustered around tables laden with finger sandwiches and punch that was too sweet. Everyone talking at once about college plans and summer jobs. I was accepting congratulations from Mrs. Peterson, my English teacher. When I saw her approaching through the crowd, a woman I didn't recognize, maybe in her 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes that seemed to hold secrets. "Lucas." Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Lucas, Silva." I nodded, excusing myself from Mrs. Peterson with a polite smile. The woman looked nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she reached into her purse. "I was asked to give this to you today." She pulled out a cream-colored envelope. my name written across it in handwriting that made my blood freeze. I'm sorry, I know this must be ... unexpected. The letters were unmistakable. The way she wrote my L, with that little flourish, the gentle slant of her script that I remembered from birthday cards and grocery lists left on the counter. My hand shook as I took the envelope, the paper feeling impossibly heavy between my fingers. Who? I started, but when I looked up, the woman was already disappearing back into the crowd, as if she'd never been there at all. The noise of the reception faded to a distant hum. I stared at the envelope, my name written in her hand, and felt the room spin slightly around me. After 10 years of silence, she'd chosen today. My graduation day. The irony was almost cruel. I found a quiet corner near the back of the hall, behind a display of graduation photos, and, with trembling fingers, I tore open the envelope. The letter was written on the same cream-colored paper, folded twice, her familiar scent of lavender still clinging faintly to the pages. My dearest Lucas. Asterisk. If you're reading this, then you've graduated high school. I know I should be there with you, in the audience, crying happy tears like all the other mothers. I know I should have been there for so many things: your first day of middle school, your first heartbreak, your first triumph. I carry the weight of every moment I've missed like stones in my chest. Asterisk, my vision blurred. I had to stop reading and take several deep breaths. The familiar ache in my throat, threatening to become something louder, more public than I could handle. Around me, celebration continued, but it felt like I was underwater, watching life happen above the surface. Asterisk, I want you to know that leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done, and staying away has been a different kind of hell. But I had to. Your father will tell you I left because I was selfish, because I couldn't handle being a mother, but that's not the truth. I left because staying would have destroyed all of us. The night before I left, I stood in your doorway watching you sleep, memorizing your face. You were clutching that stuffed elephant. Do you still have Mr. Peanuts? And you looked so peaceful, so innocent. I knew that if I stayed, that innocence would be shattered. Some secrets are too dangerous to live with. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the paper. Mr. Peanuts. She remembered Mr. Peanuts. I'd hidden him in my closet when I turned 13. Embarrassed by my attachment to a childhood toy. But sometimes I still slept with him when the loneliness became too much. Asterisk, I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day, not for a single moment. I've watched from a distance the elementary school Christmas plays, your middle school graduation, your soccer games freshman year. I was there, in the back, in the shadows, breaking my own heart over and over again, because I couldn't run to you, couldn't cheer your name, couldn't be the mother you deserved. Asterisk, the words hit me like physical blows. She'd been there, at my soccer games. I tried to remember scanning the stands, looking for her face among the crowd. And now I wondered if she'd been there all along, just invisible to my desperate searching. 4. Revelations that changed everything. Asterisk, the anonymous flowers on your 16th birthday, those were from me. The scholarship money that appeared in your college fund, when your father thought it came from the school district, that was me, too. I've been taking care of you the only way I could, from the shadows, like a ghost haunting her own life. Asterisk, my breath caught in my throat. The flowers, I remembered them, clearly, a beautiful arrangement of sunflowers and white roses that had appeared on our doorstep with no card, no signature. Dad had assumed they were from a neighbor, and I'd secretly hoped they were from some secret admirer, but they were from her. She'd been close enough to our house to leave flowers. Asterisk, you're probably wondering why I left, why I couldn't just tell you the truth. The answer is your father's brother, Michael. Uncle Mike, who used to visit every Sunday, who brought you candy and made you laugh. What you didn't know, what your father refused to see, was that Mike was sick in a way that made him dangerous to children. To you. Asterisk, the letter slipped from my hands, fluttering to the floor like a wounded bird. Uncle Mike. Sweet funny Uncle Mike, who died in a car accident when I was 9. I remembered crying at his funeral. Remembered Dad holding me while I sobbed for the uncle who'd always had time for my silly questions and knock-knock jokes. With shaking hands, I picked up the letter and continued reading. Even though every instinct screamed at me to stop, to burn it, to pretend I'd never seen it. Asterisk, I tried to tell your father what I suspected, what I'd seen. The way Mike looked at you, touched you a little too long, a little too familiarly. The gifts that were too expensive, too personal. The way he always offered to babysit when we went out. But your father loved his brother blindly, couldn't see what was right in front of him. When I threatened to go to the police with my suspicions, Mike threatened me back. He told me he'd make sure something terrible happened to you if I ever spoke a word. He knew people, he said. People who could make problems disappear. People who could make little boys disappear. I didn't know if he was bluffing, but I couldn't risk your life to find out. Asterisk, the reception hall spun around me. I felt sick, disoriented, like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Uncle Mike, the uncle I'd mourned, whose death I'd grieved alongside Dad. My mother had run away to protect me from him. Asterisk, so I made a choice that destroyed me, but saved you. I left, knowing that if I wasn't there, Mike would have no reason to hurt you. I left, and I've regretted it every day since, but I've never regretted keeping you safe. When he died 3 years later, I wanted so desperately to come home, but by then, the damage was done. You'd built a life without me. Your father had learned to raise you alone. How could I waltz back in and shatter everything with the truth? Tears were streaming down my face now, silent and hot. All these years, I'd hated her for leaving. I'd imagined her living some fabulous new life without the burden of motherhood, starting fresh somewhere with someone new. I'd never imagined her sacrificing everything to keep me safe from a threat I hadn't even known existed. Asterisk, I know this doesn't excuse the pain I caused you. I know that protection doesn't feel like love when you're 8 years old and your mother just vanishes. I know I robbed you of so much bedtime stories, homework help, someone to cheer for you in the stands without hiding. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Asterisk, my chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. Around me, the graduation celebration continued, laughter, conversations, the clink of glasses, but I existed in a bubble of revelation and grief. Everything I believed about my childhood, about my family, about her, was crumbling and reforming into something entirely different. Asterisk, if you're reading this, it means I kept my promise to watch over you until you were grown. You're 18 now, legally an adult, safely beyond Mike's reach forever. You have choices now that you didn't have as a child. You can hate me, which I would understand. You can forget me, which might be easier. Or, if you think you might want to hear my voice again, there's a phone number on the back of this letter. Asterisk 5. The search for real answers. I couldn't face Dad that night. Instead, I drove around town for hours. The letter burning like a brand in my jacket pocket. My mother's revelations echoing in my head until they became a deafening roar. By the time I finally came home, Dad was asleep in his chair, still wearing his graduation day shirt, an empty glass beside him that smelled like whiskey and grief. I stood in the doorway watching him sleep, seeing him differently now. Not just as the man who'd raised me alone, but as someone who'd been lied to, manipulated, who'd lost his wife without ever understanding why. Part of me wanted to wake him up, to demand answers, to ask if he'd really been that blind to his brother's true nature. But another part of me, the part that had learned to protect people from painful truths, let him sleep. The next morning, I called in sick to my summer job and drove to Aunt Sarah's house instead. She was Dad's sister, the family keeper of memories and secrets, the one who still had boxes of old photos in her attic and opinions about everyone's business whether you wanted them or not. Lucas, sweetheart. She opened the door with flour-dusted hands and a surprised smile. What brings you by so early? I need to ask you about Uncle Mike, I said, without preamble, stepping into her kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Her smile faltered. Something flickered across her face, recognition, fear, guilt before she turned away to busy herself with wiping already clean counters. What about Mike? You know he passed when you were little. Terrible accident. Was it an accident? I pulled out the letter, holding it like evidence. Because I have reason to think it might not have been. Sarah's hands stilled on the dish rag. For a long moment, she stared out her kitchen window at the bird feeder where cardinals pecked at seeds. their red feathers bright against the morning light. Where did you get that? Her voice was barely above a whisper. She wrote to me, Mum. She told me why she really left. Sarah sank into a kitchen chair, as if her legs had given out. Oh honey, oh Lucas. I was hoping you'd never have to know. So you knew. The betrayal hit me fresh, raw. All these years, you knew why she left, and you let me think she just abandoned me. It wasn't my story to tell, Sarah said, tears forming in her eyes. And your mother made me promise. She said, if the truth ever came out before you were grown, before you were safe, Mike might hurt you, just to hurt her. But he's been dead for 9 years. And your mother's been calling me every few months for 9 years, asking about you, making sure you were okay, begging for pictures and updates. Sarah reached across the table and grabbed my hand. She never stopped being your mother, Lucas. She just had to be it from far away. My throat felt thick. The car accident. Sarah's laugh was bitter. Mike wrapped his car around a tree on a back road at 2 in the morning, drunk out of his mind and high on God knows what. The police found things in his apartment afterward, pictures, videos that proved your mother had been right all along. Your father never knew. I made sure of that. Some truths are too heavy for a good man to carry. The room spun slightly. All these years, Dad had grieved an innocent brother, had blamed Mum for tearing their family apart, never knowing that she'd been protecting us from a monster wearing a familiar face. There's more, Sarah continued, getting up to pour coffee with shaking hands. The scholarship money that mysteriously appeared in your college fund. The anonymous tips your father got about better paying jobs. The way certain bills seemed to disappear right when money was tightest. That was all her, working through me, through lawyers, through friends. She's been your guardian angel for 10 years, and you never knew. I thought about all those small miracles that had shaped my childhood. The unexpected financial relief that always came just when we needed it most. The opportunities that seemed to fall into Dad's lap at exactly the right moments. She'd been orchestrating our lives from the shadows, sacrificing her own happiness to ensure ours. 6. Reconnection or closure. It took me 3 days to find the courage to dial the number on the back of the letter. 3 days of staring at those 10 digits, of picking up the phone and setting it down again, of rehearsing conversations that might never happen. When I finally pressed the buttons, my hands were shaking so badly, I had to try twice. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, a voice I hadn't heard in 10 years said, "Hello." It was her. Older, maybe a little rougher around the edges, but unmistakably her. The voice that used to sing me lullabies, that used to read me stories, that had whispered, "I'll be right back" on a Tuesday in March when I was 8 years old. Mum. The word came out broken, barely more than a breath. I heard her sharp intake of air, followed by a silence so complete, I wondered if the line had gone dead. Then, softly, like a prayer, "Lucas. Oh, my baby, is it really you?" We both cried then, separated by miles and years, but connected by something deeper than distance. I cried for the little boy who'd waited at the window. She cried for the mother who'd watched from shadows. We cried for all the lost time, all the missed moments, all the love that had nowhere to go for a decade. I got your letter. I managed through the tears. I know about Uncle Mike, about everything. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't make up for missing your childhood, but I couldn't let him hurt you. I couldn't risk it." "You saved me," I said, the truth of it settling into my bones. "You sacrificed everything to save me." We talked for hours. She told me about the apartment she'd lived in across town for the past 3 years. Close enough to see me, but far enough to stay hidden. About the job she'd taken at a non-profit helping other women escape dangerous situations. About the sleepless nights spent wondering if she'd made the right choice. About the photos she'd secretly taken at my soccer games that she kept in a shoebox like treasures. I told her about Dad's struggles, about how he'd never remarried, never even dated. How he still loved her despite everything. I told her about school, about my plans for college, about the boy I was becoming, and the man I hoped to be. "Your father is a good man," she said. "He deserved better than what I put him through. Maybe, .. maybe someday I can explain Help him understand. He needs to know. I agreed. We all need to heal from this. 2 weeks later, we met at a small cafe downtown. I saw her through the window before I went in older than I remembered. Lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, but still beautiful, still unmistakably my mother. She stood when she saw me, her hand covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Look how tall you are, she breathed, when I reached her table. Look how handsome. I hugged her then, really hugged her. And she felt smaller than I remembered, but warmer too, like coming home after a long journey. She smelled like lavender and possibility, like second chances and hard-won wisdom. We're taking it slowly. Weekly coffee dates. Phone calls that stretch into evening. Carefully rebuilding something that was shattered but not destroyed. Dad joined us last week, his anger tempered by understanding, his grief finally finding a place to rest. It's not the family we were, but it's the family we're becoming. Yesterday, I moved Mr. Peanuts from my closet to my shelf. Not hidden anymore, but displayed a reminder that some loves survive even the longest separations. Even the most necessary sacrifices. Tonight, I'm writing her a letter in return. It starts, "Dear Mom, welcome home." Some promises take 10 years to keep. Some mothers love best from a distance. Some families break so completely that healing them requires starting over entirely. But we're starting over. Together. Finally.